Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the 12th and final episode of the series. My guest today is Tobi Doeringer, and he's going to be talking about his experiences as a TCK in an incredibly diverse and international school. So, Toby, welcome. And let's just start off by asking the school that you went to, that was in Germany, right?
Correct. That was in Germany, in Oberursel by Frankfurt International School.
Frankfurt International School. And so, how many nationalities exactly were at that school? You said it was pretty diverse.
65.
hmm And so you had the opportunity to interact with basically almost any culture uh, you can find, right?
Correct. From all around the world.
From all
That
around
was
the
still
world.
before the Germany was reunified, so quite a lot of the consulates were in Frankfurt.
Oh, okay. So like that was when they had East Germany and West Germany, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
The whole country was split,
The whole country
but
was split.
the wall was only in Berlin,
hmm So
and we still had a lot of American troops there
really?
as well. So from the higher ranking officials in the American troops, a few of the kids would also be going to FIS.
hmm So
The
I don't.
others would be going to the DOT schools, to the Department of Defense schools.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, so tell me, what was your full experience going to an international school during that time?
Well, was really immersed in all the cultures, and my French changed every 2 to 3 years. Apart from the people that also were German or lived in Germany full time.
hmm
So I would say about 80% of the uh, classmates were in constant flux.
Yeah. Did that ever bother you at all?
At some point, yeah, it bothered me because not only were the school friends in constant flux, but also uh, my classmates didn't all live in the area. So if you went to local school, and I knew through a few of my local friends um, that you always have friends in your area. But with us, people, because the school was one of the very early international schools, so students lived up to 1 hour bus ride away to get
Mhm.
to school. So it's not like you can meet up after school and do something, or walk home together, take the bike home together, etc.
Okay. So I'm guessing that school was in West Germany, right?
Correct. Yeah, Frankfurt, outside of Frankfurt, in Oberhausen.
Like on the outskirts.
Yes, at the town is mountains, the mountain range right behind Frankfurt.
Oh yeah. So tell me how did going to an international school mainly differ from going to a local school in the area?
Well, basically, from kindergarten on, it was bilingual because, well, it was English. So I grew up more bilingual. And yeah, I guess the whole teaching system as well
Mhm.
made it very different because it
So
was American and then IB, because the Frankfurt International School was one of the first IB schools in the world
mhm.
during the International Baccalaureate. So there was a lot of implementation in the IB program as well to make international travel easier for all of the families, which is more common today. Today, a lot of the even local schools that call themselves international schools have IB program, but back then there was only a handful of schools that were doing IB.
Mhm. So interacting with, like you said, 65 different cultures or nationalities. So how did that change your worldview?
Well, basically, when you meet a person, you already understand that there's a different cultural background. So you look beyond that and look at the person the first time you meet somebody
hmm
anywhere in the world. At the same time, you know what their likes and dislikes might be, unless it's a very unique nationality.
And what kind of cross-cultural enrichment did you gain from that?
Um, well, the enrichment I gained from that is that what I just said is that you can just go beyond the nationalities as soon as you meet somebody, and respectively just look at the person right away.
Yeah. All right. So, how do you feel the system differs now than it did back then when Germany was split? Like you said, the local schools now do offer IB programs. Uh, but what else do you think differentiates now from then?
Well, I would say my case and that of other Germans was quite special. So a few of the ones that went to the international school actually left a bit earlier or continued German school, because at the time, that's a little bit complex. At the time, if you were German and you did the IB at an international school outside of Germany, you could study in Germany. If you were a foreigner and did the IB anywhere, you could study in Germany. If you were a German in Germany and did the IB instead of going to German school, you were not allowed to, it was not recognized by the German universities.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
that's quite an interesting international experience, which meant I didn't go study in Germany, but I went to study in the UK through the Erasmus program. And the UK then sent me back to study in Germany. And that was quite surreal because all the professors at the German university didn't understand me. They thought I was a German and should be able to think and act and react and do everything like a German student would. But
Mhm.
I'd never been to a German school my whole life. So it's very difficult from people when they see you from the outside to understand, well, that you're basically a TCK.
Yeah. Did you find it how much time did you spend in the UK?
3 years of my 4-year course.
3 years of your 4 years. And did you find it easier to study in the UK than it was in Germany?
Uh, Definitely because it was a system I understood. So
Mhm.
the UK system is a lot more like the international school system, also in the sense of that it's more uh, practical theory, and the German system, especially if you're studying business, everything underlying is all mathematics.
Mhm. So it was more inclusive in the UK.
Correct.
Okay. And you said you have kids that go into international schools now, correct?
Uh, Correct. Two have finished,
Mm-hmm.
and my kids are Eurasian,
Mm-hmm.
and two are studying in the UK now. My oldest at my alma mater, my youngest my son in London at the RADA, Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. And then my youngest, she's joining us once the borders open again to Bali to study at the Green School.
Oh yeah. So can you draw any parallels from their experiences and your experiences? Do you feel that some things are the same while others are different?
Well, um, I think it was partially the same, but in a sense a lot different because my oldest, she went to the German Swiss International School, and first she went to local school. So there it was, she was in the German stream, so she actually did a German school system that I never did, and did the international Abitur. My son, he did the IB, but then again, I think the school was not as international as our school was,
Mm-hmm.
just because there weren't that many nationalities. So even when people here, especially in Hong Kong, hold a certain passport, a lot of times they're still Hong Kong Chinese people that just got another passport from another country.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of schools here look very international, but they're actually, I would say, local international schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for my youngest, I mean, she's going to be in the true definition of TCK and TCK just because we now spent 18 months in Europe during the pandemic, and she's going to be going to a totally new school and type of school, international school in Bali.
Hmm. And so when did you realize you were a TCK, and what was that like for you?
Um, I mean, you always realize you're a bit different because you like need an international surrounding to feel comfortable in. Um, that is same for me, same for my brother. He lived in a city for a while that wasn't very international. He couldn't stand it, so he had to move again. And I think, well, to know, I only knew that around maybe 15 years ago when I came across an article about TCKs and started reading a whole bunch of books on it. And then all of a sudden, yeah, learned a lot about myself. And
Hmm.
it's really interesting because I was having a conversation with someone the other week who is also an alumni from my school, but uh, three generations younger. And she wanted to sit down just to talk about school. And we had a nice dinner with her husband and my wife and her. And I told her about TCKs. She was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. I've never heard about this." So I think it's really interesting considering that she also went to FIS, which is one of the most advanced international schools, that the subject is not really picked up at a school level.
Hmm.
So I think something international schools should do that really are very international schools is somehow factor that into their teaching program and curriculum.
Yeah.
So that at a young age, TCKs already understand, oh, this is why I see the world the way I see the world,
Hmm.
or the way the people and cultures. This is the reason why I see them like this.
Hmm. So you feel that TCKs do see the world a little differently than anyone else?
Uh, Definitely, because they see it from all of the input that they're getting in the countries they're moving to or the cultures they're in contact with, and you take that in very differently at a young age because you just naturally take it in versus learning it at an older age. I would say this term ATCK, this adult TCK, is something very different because then you only see it at a very mature level, whereas as a child you just suck it in basically, and it stays in your memory in the back of your head.
Yeah. And when you started reading that article, like you deeply felt like it was deeply relevant to you, right? You picked up on it pretty quick.
Well, that's yeah. And when I'm interested in a subject, I picked up on it because there were some interesting points. Then I usually get a spectrum of views on it in different books and try to read whatever I can get on it. Some usually between 10 and 20 books to see what the different views are on a subject. This is my way of continued study. And through that further reading of these books, I just picked up a lot more things that taught me about myself.
Hmm.
And so this lady I was with last week or 2 weeks ago, it was really interesting because she was so excited when I told her about this, and she started reading about it, and she already fed back and said, "Oh, thanks for letting me know. Now I understand myself a lot better as well." Actually,
Yeah.
she's living in a very local setting back in my hometown now, where the school also is. But it just makes her feel inside herself, more settled to know this is why she is the way she is in
Yeah.
certain terms.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the term TCK doesn't, it's not too common. You don't hear people refer to it a lot. And like, unfortunately, a lot of TCKs grow up not knowing that they are TCKs, and then therefore they cannot relate to anybody on that level, right?
Correct. Correct.
So
I
right
think
now,
I mean, I think that's why an important point, as I mentioned before, might be to already tell the kids in school, oh, you might be a TCK.
mhm. and and even cross-cultural kids who like immigrants and refugees, it's a similar experience to them.
Correct.
So right now you said you live in Germany, Hong Kong, and Indonesia, Indonesia, right?
Hong Kong and Indonesia. Yeah, that's mainly. I was just in Germany because of the pandemic.
Mhm. Yeah. So, what's that like for you right now as an adult? Going to visit all these different countries, and every one of them has a different culture. Does that remind you of your time in your international school?
Oh, definitely, and it's super easy for me to go between these cultures. And my one of my jobs for the longest time was for one of our businesses to do international sales. And there really helps because I know when somebody comes from a different culture, and here we're talking about mainly A brands and the higher level people in those companies, then I understand and know what I can do with them, what they might like to talk about. So I have to keep informed what's interesting around the world and what they enjoy. If someone's coming from a certain country, I might know, okay, they prefer to go for fine dining because that's their culture. Or if they're Italian, even they're in Hong Kong, they only like to go to Italian restaurant. Or if they're Australian, I can take them for a nice steak and go for a beer. So, and that's just these small things that and that then the people you're working with appreciate as well.
So that's kind of a familiar setting for you, being in a different country than the one of your passports, right?
Yeah, yeah, correct. And also speaking the multiple languages to know the cultures. And it's really interesting. So if I meet old friends from school, I'll know that they at least speak, I would say at least 90% of them, three languages, which is basically German, English, and French. And we might, when we meet and talk to each other, we might use these three different languages in a sentence.
Oh yeah.
Just because there's specific words in a language that fit exactly the nuance of what you're trying to say much better than in the other language.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some things that cannot be directly translated from one language to another.
Correct. And that I can only do with people I really know. Okay, they speak two languages or more, or especially people that I went to school with, because then I know it outright already.
Mm-hmm. So for a lot of TCKs, basically they grow up and they feel confused about where their home really is. And you're from Germany, but you work in Hong Kong and Indonesia, and you have all these people from so many different countries. Have you ever been confused about where your home really is?
No, because getting back to what we just talked about in languages,
Mm-hmm.
there's a word in German that doesn't exist in English, which is Heimat. I think roughly translated, you can say it's where your roots are or your family roots are.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Zuhause, which means where your home is.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I have Zuhause is in Hong Kong at the moment, or Hong Kong and Bali, because that's where I spend most of the time. But Heimat is always where my family roots are, which is then still my hometown in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And in English, there's no word for this. So here we're back to the language thing. And
Yeah.
if you say Heimat to any German, they will connect a very special feeling to it,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't exist in English.
Yeah. And
But
go
I must say the last 18 months, it's been a bit confusing because we're on the way to spend more time in Bali than in Hong Kong.
because of the
But I spent
pandemic.
so much time in Germany, so and then I was like, oh, maybe I should spend more time there as well. But it hasn't been home for 25 years, more than 25 years, 30 years actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that's because of the pandemic, though, right?
Yes. No, but it got me thinking again about where is home in the English sense, actually.
Yeah. And going back to the topic of your schoolmates, they were in constant flux. Did you ever find that keeping in contact with them was really tough? How did you maintain these relationships?
Um, I think back in those times, yes, because you didn't have the internet or anything that you have today. And then Nowadays with social media, you're back in touch with almost everybody again. You're very close friends anyway, you stayed in touch with, even through whatever you had back then. Just addresses. But today, some people say, oh, I don't want to do social media, it's too hectic. On the other hand, it allows me to let my friends around the world know what I'm up to. I'm not very intense in it, but then they know, oh, he's been there, he's been doing some things. And then when I meet them, we can start off wherever we left off last time without having to talk about what have we been up to, but talk about more meaningful things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get fed up with it, because once you've told the same thing 20 times in 3 days, you don't want to say it anymore.
Yeah. And
So I use social media mainly as a medium to keep my friends, also from school and wherever, informed about what is happening, and do that usually only for friends as well. And that through these social media, of course, I'm in touch again with people I don't think I would be in touch from school if that weren't available today.
yeah.
Then I might be in touch with 10 people. This way I'm probably in touch with over 80% of my class.
Yeah. So you actually reached back to people who you went to school with all these years ago, right?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, when I go somewhere in the world, I'm in the city, and then you see someone's there, and then because as a TCK, it's a small world anyway.
Yeah.
So I was in this, actually my brother was the class above me, and this was a girl who was in lady who was in his class, nowadays lady, I guess. And I was in San Francisco. I think it was the last time when we still could travel every year. I usually go to CES in Vegas, and 3 years ago. And then a good a friend from 2 classes below me, who also lives in Bali, he said, oh, I see you in San Francisco, let's go have some German food. I was just there for a few nights. And I was like, okay, let's meet for lunch, have some German food. They have a nice German restaurant in San Fran. And then all of a sudden, halfway through our meal, this Asian or Korean lady comes over to us and says, hey, aren't you Tobi? And I was like, yeah. And she was from my brother's class above me. So we all of a
What?
sudden had 3 people, from our school, the one totally by chance. And she was like, oh, great. So we sat together and finished our meal. And that's only because she also, was connected on Facebook and saw that I was in San Francisco, and said she saw me in that restaurant. She was like, oh, let's see if it's him.
That's insane.
And those things happen quite a lot, which is interesting. The world is very small, because it seems a lot of the international school kids and TCKs just travel the world as well, and are always aware of their surroundings, that there might be somebody there they know.
Yeah. I feel like TCKs do realize that the world is a lot smaller than what most people think.
Yeah, I think for TCKs, the world is like what a city is for others. A
Yeah.
city is also a small town for someone who's always there.
Mhm.
And for TCKs, the world there's a small town that's always there, and that they know they might see each other, because of course probably also certain backgrounds, ideas, tastes.
Yeah. And my last question for you today is, what are the main benefits and challenges that you've gained from being a TCK?
I think the main benefits is just to have a very worldly view. Very good German word for that as well. Weltanschauung, the way that you look at the world. And respecting everybody for their culture and cultural diversity, but also understanding them as a person right away, so that you look beyond that cultural part. You don't have any preconceptions towards the personality of a person. And the difficult part is I guess having to learn to understand your opposite first, and always having to be reacting to them and what their surrounding field is. So if I meet somebody, I know he's a TCK as well, I can talk to him very openly about everything I do. If I just meet somebody and realize, okay, he's from place X and this is his world, if I just talk to them very openly, it could be overwhelming for the counterparty. You understand what I mean with that?
Yeah, yeah, I
So
totally
like,
do. All right. Tobi, thank you so much for coming on today.
oh no, thanks for. I hope one of the reasons I do it is I hope that other people, like as I said, I just always tell people I meet who I realize are also TCKs about TCK, so they can learn more about themselves. And I hope this can also help to other TCKs who maybe don't know they're TCKs yet, or TCKs to learn a little bit about the culture.
Bridge the gaps between people.
Yes.